Welcome, everybody. We're going to be working on the Unit 11 homework this evening. I did not get a chance to record a fresh Unit 11 lecture video, so you can use the one from fall of 2024 as your lecture. But I do have all these topics here, right? And basically, we're working on this concept called a view. And I'm just going to look at the syntax of it really quickly just to make sure that we have a good underpinning as to what we're really doing. Creating a view, I think of it sort of like in programming when we create sort of a function, which is we create a block of code, we give it a name, and then we can run it. Now, in truth, it is not a function at all. We are creating a database construct called a view, which is basically a pre-created query so that we don't have to regurgitate the same query over and over again and write the code from scratch every time. Like if you have a query that you're running that needs to be used a lot, it really makes a lot of sense to not have to write it every time. You just basically call it, it's already created, and then it just executes. The basic syntax of it is you use the create view, you give it a name, and then use the as keyword, and then write your query, right? And then when you want to run it in the future, you just simply trigger that view. And what you guys will notice here is when we get into the database itself, that we look at our databases, and each one of the databases has a little pre-created structure or root, basically, in the schema for a view. And after we've created a view and executed the view, and this is kind of interesting, it will build itself. Technically, it's compiling. And by the way, we're not here to talk about that concept right now, but it gets built into the database. It actually becomes part of the database. Once it's part of the database, then all we have to do is trigger it to run by calling it. So that's the process we're going to go through tonight. Why do we do this? And so think about of this as, I guess, micro lecture, since we kind of missed it last week. It makes complex queries simple. You don't have to recreate them, right? We're reusing our code. Security is enhanced. Nobody has to be able to look at the logic of your query or what stuff goes into it. They're just utilizing it. In a way, it makes things more readable because you're not worried about the nitty gritty of the query code. You're just worried about what it brings to you. And then data becomes abstracted. And this is kind of an abstract concept, but the point is that you attribute a simple definition to a more complicated object, and therefore you're looking at it really from a higher level view. And that's very helpful when you're working with complex sets of data. If you're running a view that just pulls customer information from the last year, that's an abstraction in and of itself as a concept. So I don't care how I get that information as long as I can get it. That's the point. It's used a lot in reporting, analytics, and then also controlling access to aspects of the database. If you think about this, most normal users, they don't need to worry about SQL code. They just want the stuff to work, right? And that's a lot of what this is about. Okay, let's move on to the assignment. And we're gonna dig in here, and I'm gonna pull up the document that goes with it. It looks like I already have it, but hey, having it twice is okay. And we're just using this for the instruction. So I'm going to have it up on screen here, and I'll refer to it as we're kind of moving along, and I'll give it a couple clicks of zoom so it's easier to read. We are going to be working with the My Guitar Shop database, one that we've been using a lot lately. And we're just going to kind of dig in here. And of course, when you guys are creating your queries, you want to paste them in here and then submit the completed document. You're always free to also submit the SQL code too, if you wish. So I'm not going to be doing any of the edits in the document. You guys know the procedure at this point. All right. So we're going to work on that database, and we're told right off the bat to create a view named order total. And I'm going to talk about this little piece here just very quickly, the naming of a view. And I know I've mentioned this, in previous weeks, and I probably saw it in the lecture video too. But often when we're creating like these weird objects in the database, we'll sometimes either use a prefix or a suffix to indicate what kind of an object is. So if I see it in my code, I can go, oh, it's a view. How do I know that? Because it's got this little prefix of VW, right? I could think Volkswagen on that, I guess. But some people will actually use the whole word and call it view, order total, or the converse, they'll say order total underscore view. And that way, when you see it in your code, you know exactly what it is. You don't have to guess at it. And this is now, mind you, this is not a requirement of the code. It's a convention that coders use to be able to more quickly identify their objects. And when we start talking about stored procedures and custom functions later, we're going to use the same kind of approaches with some of the parameters and stuff, and you'll see how that's helpful. So just a convention, by the way. All right, so it says create a view named order total that displays the order ID and a total of the associated orders. All right, so let's kind of dig in and do that. I do have my cheat sheet open here on the other screen, so I'm going to pull that up so I can look at it, and we'll flip over to MySQL Workbench here, and I'm going to go full screen on that. And a couple of things I do want to talk about, and actually it's going to be for the next unit that we'll do it, but we're going to tweak some settings inside of here, the safe mode thing later, because that'll be helpful for us. All right, for starters, I'm going to kind of collapse down all these schemas here just to make it cleaner to look at. And I think that you guys have learned at this point that the active database in the schema table is the one that's indicated in bold. And I want you to notice that it's not the one we want. So I do have to start with a use statement here. And let's zoom, use my guitar shop semicolon, and then we'll execute that and just make sure that we're attached to the correct database. Now, we were told to create a view, so I'm going to use the create keyword, the view keyword. Now we're going to give it a name, and I would strongly suggest that you follow a naming convention sort of like this. And be mindful. You can change the order of it. You can put it as a suffix, right? Or you can spell out the whole word or whatever works for you. I've also seen some programmers, database people just do this. They know that's a view. They know that's a procedure. They know that's a function, that kind of thing. I think the underscore helps to make it more clear though, and that's a personal preference. All right, so create view, give it a name as, and then we write our regular query, right? So if we look at what the instruction was, that displays the order ID and total of the associated orders. Okay, so let's kind of write that. So we're going to select the order ID. And all right, there's a little bit of a clue in the way that that was worded in the document. So if I was to look at orders, and let's just do a quick look at that table, right? And you'll notice that here's the order ID, and then we have like certain payments and whatever that happen, right? However, you'll also notice that sometimes orders basically have more than one product. Now, when you're looking at this, I want you to be mindful that this doesn't tell me the order amount. Where the heck is that? Well, that's in the order items table. So this just tells me like who ordered it, what the order number is, what the shipping amount was, the tax amount, the ship date, how they paid, blah, 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 right? But nothing about the total. So the total has to come from elsewhere. and that's going to come from this table, right? Which indicates the order ID and the product ID and the item price, right? And how many they purchased. And then I want you to notice here, some orders, like order number 7, for example, has multiple items. Okay, so we got to like deal with all of that. So where are we really going to pull the information from? Are we pulling it from the orders table? That would be the inclination. No, we're really pulling it from the order items table. So I'm going to go back here, and I'm actually going to drop down a line. And I know this is incomplete, but just so I don't forget, I'm going to say from order items. That's where we're really pulling the information from. So we're going to grab the order ID, which is there also. But then in order to figure out the actual cost, we have to take basically the quantity of the item that they purchase. So it could be 1, it could be 10, right? And times the item price. And then we're going to summarize that, right? So we're going to get a sum, and we're going to sum basically the quantity times the item price. And then let's just give it a different name. We'll alias it as total for the order. That comes from the order items table. I'm going to do a group by. This is subjective. You know, to me, it makes sense to do this. And I'm going to group it by order ID, right? So all the stuff that's together will be listed together. And then let's order it by the largest order descending. So we'll see the biggest order working its way down. All right. So now be mindful of this. When I run this isn't going to give me a result. What it's doing is it's building this object called view order total that'll add it here as a view in the schema, and then I can run it. Right. So I'm going to take this query here. I'm going to do the selective run, and there it is. So we created a view, and now I'm going to come over to the schema table, hit the little refresh, and then you'll notice under views, I now have the view, which is this pre-built query. Now, I still don't have a query result, but now if I want to run this logic or this SQL code, this query, now I just have to basically run that as sort of like a query item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything from view order total. So I'm going to make it run, and I want to see all the results. Kind of a double-edged sword here, right? The fact that I'm doing another select statement on this, right, which means I have this pre-built thing that would just work. I just want to see all the results that this brings. But the implication here is that I could also do additional filtering or querying on top of it, right? So this is kind of interesting. And one of the reasons why this is really powerful. All right, let's run this statement. And as you run it, you should see something that looks like this. You should see a singular list of all the orders, and then in descending order, the value of the order. So order ID 3 was really big. 7 had the one that had multiple products, right? And then some of them are pretty simple. Okay, you could argue that shouldn't the shipping and the discount all be included? Yeah, you could calculate that if you wish, right? And in fact, we're going to do that later. All right, everybody okay with this? Everybody's code is working. All right, I'm going to keep pressing forward here. And I apologize, I'm screen arranging here on the other screen, so I'm trying to see your faces and my code all at the same time, and sometimes that's not quite so elegant. All right, let's move on to the next one. The next, that's wrong document, I apologize. All right, so you show the query that you use to create the view, execute the query, so show the query and the output here. Now create a view called view large order total using the same one that we just created, right? So we're going to utilize what we already built. And we're going to ramp it up a little bit, right? So we're going to borrow some of the code basically. Um, and it says here, your new view must use the previous view as part of the query. However, only display those orders larger than $1,000. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a few different ways to complete this, right? So just be mindful of that. And my inclination is, right, like if you were doing this from scratch, like you just write the query, what's the big deal? But I'll show you how to use the previous view, right? So in other words, instead of selecting everything from that view, we're going to select specific things from that view. All right, so here goes. I'm going to zoom out just a tad here, and I'm going to close this output. All right, so here goes. So we are going to create another new view. All right, VW, and then we're going to say order, and actually we're going to call it large, I think, order total. So over $1,000. And we use our as keyword. Now we run our query. We're going to select a few different things, but here I'm going to put it in the from right away, just so we don't forget where we're getting this from. We're not pulling this from a table. Now we're pulling it from a view and being mindful of the fact that when you're pulling it from a view, it basically is a table, right? The output of it is a table. And then we're going to have a where clause, but we're not sure what goes in there yet. Right now, we're working on this piece. So what are we going to select from there? Well, we're going to pull in the order ID, as we did before. And we're also going to pull in the value. And normally I would run this and then show you why I would do this next step. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to tell you straight up that I'm going to round it. And what am I rounding? I'm going to take the total that I calculate and I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places, because otherwise we get some hairy output from this one. All right. And then once again, I'm going to display this as total, but it's rounded. Okay. That comes from the view that we've already created. So think about what this does. I'm creating a view that then calls another view. Pretty cool, right? So it saves us needing to write all this code in the mix of it. But now we're looking for a specific thing. There is a criteria here. We want the total to be greater than 1,000, right? Or if you want to include 1,000, of course, it would be 999.99. So now we're just going to run this create view. I'm going to run that selectively. And then once again, I'm going to refresh over here and see, all right, there it is. It's there. Now, as we did before, we're going to run that view. Like so. All right, here comes the run, and now we'll actually see output. Except it's giving me an error. And what's my error? It says, error code 1146. My guitar shop view large order total doesn't exist. So did I misspell something here? Pretty sure I typed it right.
You named it VS instead of VW.
Ah, excellent catch. All right. So kind of goofy, but here's what I'm going to do to fix it. And now you guys can call me on this and go, did you do that on purpose? And you know what? I totally did. And I'm going to show you how to get rid of a view now. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I do this, because as we move forward, this is helpful to know how to do as well. So I'm going to drop that one, right? And if I look here and say, oh yeah, sure enough, VS, very strange, large order total is what it stands for. But I'm going to execute this code and notice how the view immediately disappeared in the schema. All right, let's fix this. Let's run this query again. Okay, let's refresh to make sure it's there. It looks like it's spelled right this time. So now I can run this command and it should give me output. And there you go. Is it giving me all the orders over 1,000? It seems like it, right? Well, if I wanted to verify that, I could rerun this, right? Look at the output and go, yep, that looks right to me. And I'm trying to find my little divider here, right? Yeah, there were four of them were over 1,000. So when I run the large order total view, select everything from it. Yeah, four outputs is correct. I'm going to get rid of that, but just be mindful if you misname something, you can't just like go up there and change it because we're building the code and it gets put in the database. So I got to get rid of it and recreate it and name it correctly. All right. Next piece. All right, so we're going to go back to the original order total and modify it. And it says now we want to include the discount amount as part of the calculation. And we should have a net total for each order ID. All right, so now we're going to rebuild this original view that we created. Right, so we're going to like redo this. If you just caught on to what I just said, you have to like delete the previous one. You can't just change it and think it's going to work. So I got to put in a drop statement here, and then we'll execute that, and then we'll watch it disappear, right? So now we'll start to build the fresh one. I'm going to pause here for just a moment. All right, so given the fact that we need to alter it, it would make sense that we could still reuse the original code, right? So I'm gonna, normally what I would do is I would just tweak this, but just so we have the original, I'm just gonna leave it there. That's also kind of helpful. So here's the gonna be new version of it. A lot of this is going to stay the same. So it's still going to come from order items. We're still going to group it and order it highest to lowest. We're still going to select the order ID, the sum times the price is total, but we also want to get a total with the discount, right? That's the ask. So I'm going to put a comma here, and then I'm going to think about how do we get the total with the discount? Well, all right, so we got to take the item price minus the discount amount, right? And just to show you where I'm getting this, I'm not just coming up with it from thin air. So item price minus the discount amount, right? And that's going to give us a new price that we're going to multiply against the quantity ordered. It might be one, it might be two. There's one item that has two in there. And then that will be the new total with the discount. Right, so there's a little bit of math there. Just to show you the whole statement, I'm just going to copy paste it in for efficiency's sake and time. That would be it. And really, I would probably format it kind of like this, just so it's easier to see. Right. So I'm taking the item price minus the discount amount and then multiplying that against how many is ordered. And then that'll be called total with discount. Otherwise, it's the same. Nothing else is changing. So now that I have that altered, I'm going to rerun the code. Right. And then now we have it. And now we got to rerun the query. And I have that already up here, right? Once again, normally I would just run it from there, but just for the sake of sequencing this, let's run it from down here. And here goes the execution. And there you go. So this is what the output of that should look like ideally. I'm assuming you guys are all good. If you're not, just drop it in the chat or unmute and say it. All right. So now we're being asked to drop the large order view thing. Don't forget to check to see if it exists. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna copy that code over to now. We've already done this, so like I'm being mindful of that. I could have left it in my code. I'm trying to close this, but it doesn't want to close. There we go. All right. So here's the command to do that. Of course, do we want to make sure it exists yet? Just update your schema table, hit the refresh. I don't know why, like when you create something, it doesn't refresh right away, but when you delete it, it goes away immediately. It's kind of weird. Um, but I do see it there. And here goes the execution of that statement. And there it goes. All right, so now it is gone. And let's go back to the instructions now. And the very last one. Now, what they want us to do in this next step, and there is like a whole link to this, which you should follow and read up on, talking about how to create an updatable view, right? So in other words, how do we create something that we can also alter in the aftermath? And we're going to create basically a new view called customer info, and then we're going to tweak it and see what happens, right? So follow along with me here. All right. So instead of just saying create, all right, and we didn't try this so you see like what the aftermath is of it, but basically, if I had already created one and then try to run the create command again, I would just simply get an error message saying, hey, you can't do that. You already have that. Right. But what if I want to like not go through the process of dropping something and then recreating it? Then you can add this command. You can say create or replace view. So this is kind of like doing an update, basically, is the way to look at it. And we're going to call this one customer info. And we'll give it the as keyword, right? So like we are going to be looking for simple information here. And this is a very simple query. So I'm just going to copy paste it in just so you can see what I'm doing here, which is this. Now, I do want to take a really quick look at the customers table, right? And this is, once again, one of these patterns I really want you to get into. I want you to remember way back when we had an exercise where we added a column called active. You guys remember that? We did like an update on this table. And then this is kind of like a true false field. And then also kind of to reinforce the concept that 1 is true, 0 is false, right? So basically, are we looking, is this an active customer? True or false? And false does not imply null. Null is the absence of information. It is not true or false, right? And so this is the data that we're working with, right? The structure of the data. All right, let's go ahead and run this view creation. So like we just did it. Now we're going to update again, and we'll see now we have that customer info is there. And then of course we're going to execute that query. And once again, in the interest of speed and time, there we go. We're just going to do that. And then I'm going to execute. And then you'll see that it did work. And it pulls back the information. All right. So now that I've put in the ability to create or replace a view, right? So now the view has become adjustable. It's not hard-coded anymore. It is an adjustable view. I'm going to run an update command on the view, right? Just like I do like on a table, for example, right? So I'm going to update the view called customer info. And I'm going to set the active column equal to 1 for a particular person. And I'm looking at it right below there, right? And so how about, let's take the next person on the list, which is where their last name equals Brown. Like so. So think about this. This kind of creates, this view kind of creates like this like static thing, right? And now I'm gonna change the output of it using this. Now watch what happens. All right. And did it execute? Right? 1 row affected, 1 row matched. But how do I don't see it. oh yeah, you got to see it again, right? So you got to run this one again. So that's why you don't see it. So this update command changed the data, but really I need to run this again to see the results. Now you notice Christine Brown is now changed. That's really kind of the goal of this. If this does not work for you, there's a chance that maybe your safety settings are still on. And Emma, is that what you're referring to? Did you get an error message on yours? Okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to call this recording done here. If you want to share your screen really quick, we can take a look, but otherwise this video is complete.